Imagine being the coolest kid in school and nobody knowing what to do with you. That was the Plymouth Prowler. A car so bold, so jaw-dropping, so unlike anything else on American roads, that it confused, frustrated, and ultimately outlived the very brand that built it. It's 1993. America is hungry. The muscle car era is a fading memory. The malaise of the 1970s and 80s, those sad, underpowered, boxy years, has left a generation of car enthusiasts feeling like something sacred was stolen from them. And then, on a sun-soaked floor at the Detroit Auto Show, under a single brilliant spotlight, she appears. Long, low, purple. Fenders flared wide open like wings. Front wheels completely exposed, naked to the world, like a pre-war Indy-racer reborn from the dead. A long, sculpted hood stretching forward like the prow of a ship. Quad-round taillights glowing red like embers at the rear. A body so curvaceous, so deliberately theatrical, that people just stopped walking. They stopped. They stared. Some of them reached out to touch it, only to pull their hands back, unsure if it was even real. This was the Plymouth Prowler concept car. And in that single moment, Chrysler had done something almost nobody in Detroit believed was still possible. They made people feel something. The man behind this rolling fever dream was Thomas C. Gale, Chrysler's head of design, and a man with a very specific obsession. His love for 1930s hot rods was not casual. This was a man who kept a hopped-up 1932 Ford in his own garage. A man who spent weekends turning wrenches on old steel, whose eyes lit up when he talked about the proportions of pre-war American machinery. And when Chrysler gave him a platform to dream, Thomas Gale didn't dream small. But Gale didn't work alone. Years before the Prowler became a concept, Chrysler had sponsored a student project at the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California, one of the most prestigious automotive design schools in the world. A young student named Douglas "Chip" Foose, a man who would later become one of the most celebrated custom car designers in American history, submitted a thesis that included drawings of a retro-styled roadster. Foose originally sketched it as a coupe, but modified it into a roadster form. That DNA, that raw, open-wheel, hot rod soul, found its way into the marrow of what would become the Prowler. When Gale saw the reaction at Detroit in 1993, when he watched men in suits and women in heels lean across the velvet rope just to get closer, he knew something important. He knew they had to build it. And almost miraculously, in a decade when Detroit was playing it safe, when corporate accountants ruled design studios, when market research had neutered 1,000 great ideas before they ever reached production, Chrysler said yes. They were going to build the Prowler. For real. For the street. For America. Now, building a dream is never as clean as dreaming one. The engineers took one look at the Prowler concept and began making their lists. Lists of problems. Lists of challenges. Lists of reasons why this thing couldn't, or shouldn't, be built the way Gale and Foose had envisioned it. Those open front wheels? A nightmare for packaging brake lines and suspension components. That low, sweeping body? Almost impossible to engineer with conventional steel stampings. That long, dramatic hood? It needed something under it, something worthy of the drama. And this is where the first major controversy was born. Because Chrysler, pinching pennies, managing resources, balancing budgets across an enormous lineup, decided to power the Prowler not with a thundering V8, not with something that matched the savage visual promise of that wide-open stance and those exposed rubber tires, but with a V6. A V6. The same engine family that powered their everyday LH platform sedans. The 3.5-liter SHC 24-valve unit that you could find in the Chrysler 300M or the Dodge Intrepid. A perfectly respectable engine in a family car. But in a car that looked like it wanted to race across salt flats and frightened horses? In a car that wore an aesthetic borrowed from the wildest hot rods ever built? To the enthusiast community, this felt like a betrayal before the car even launched. But here's the thing, and this is important, Chrysler wasn't being lazy. They were being practical, yes, but the 3.5-liter wasn't a bad engine. In 1997, the base version produced 214 horsepower. And in 1999, when they upgraded to an aluminum block version, that number climbed to 253 horsepower. That was actually competitive with, or better than, many of Chrysler's own V8 Magnum engines of the same era in terms of peak power output. The engine was coupled to a 4-speed auto-stick semi-automatic transmission, a gearbox mounted not in front, where you'd normally find it, but all the way at the rear of the car. This was not an accident. This was engineering elegance. By placing the transmission at the back, the Prowler achieved something that pure performance cars spend millions of dollars chasing: a perfect 50-50 front-to-rear weight distribution. Equal weight on all four corners. A balance point that gave the car confidence in corners, neutrality through bends, a planted feel that belied its lightweight construction. And lightweight it was. The Prowler's body was not steel. Almost nothing on it was conventional. The bodywork was crafted from hand-formed aluminum panels, assembled by skilled workers at a facility in Shadyside, Ohio, before being sent to the Connor Avenue assembly plant in Detroit, Michigan. There, also by hand, the Prowler was put together, not stamped by robots, not mass-produced on a high-speed line, hand-assembled, one at a time. The way old cars used to be made, the way the hot rods that inspired it were made, in garages and backyards, piece by piece, with human hands. The chassis used adhesive bonding in many places rather than traditional welding, cutting-edge technology for its era, shared more with aerospace manufacturing than conventional automotive production. The result? A car that tipped the scales at just under 2,800 pounds. Light. Nimble. Almost delicate. And those wheels, those famous, theatrical, exposed wheels, were a statement all their own. Up front, 17-inch hoops wrapped in 225-section tires. Out back, massive 20-inch wheels behind 295-section rubber, wider than many sports cars of the era. The proportions were deliberately extreme. The rear haunches were wide, planted, assertive. The front end was narrow and elegant. It looked fast standing still. Inside, unlike its brutal sibling the Dodge Viper, which offered roughly the comfort of a medieval instrument of torture, the Prowler was genuinely livable. Keyless entry, power windows and locks, dual airbags for safety, leather-trimmed bucket seats, air conditioning, a proper sound system with AM/FM and cassette player, with an optional multi-disc CD changer, a leather-wrapped steering wheel with audio controls on the back of it, a feature that was genuinely advanced for the time. A color-keyed instrument panel bezel painted to match the exterior of each individual car. Chrysler wanted this to be a car you could drive every day, a hot rod you could commute in, a show car you could actually own. They wanted it to be, in their own words, a daily driver for dreamers. 1997 model, year 1. The Prowler rolls out of Detroit. And the world wasn't quite sure what to do with it. The press loved the way it looked. That was never in question. Photographers couldn't stop shooting it. Magazine editors put it on covers. At car shows, it drew crowds the way nothing else could. You could park a Ferrari next to a Prowler and people would still drift toward the purple retro machine. But the reviews? The reviews were complicated. The performance critics were brutal. 0 to 60 in 7.2 seconds. That was the 1997 number. In a car that looked this aggressive, that wore this much visual attitude, 7.2 seconds felt like a joke. For the same money, you could buy a Corvette that would destroy the Prowler in a straight line. For less money, you could buy a Mustang GT that would give it a serious fight. The Prowler wasn't slow, not really. But it was nowhere near as fast as it looked. And in American car culture, especially in the 1990s, looks and speed were supposed to be linked. You looked fast because you were fast. The Prowler broke that contract. The V6 criticism came roaring back. Critics who had been skeptical before delivery now had ammunition. Where's the V8? They asked. Where's the thunder? Where's the shake at idle and the growl under acceleration? The Prowler's V6 was smooth, competent, even pleasant. But pleasant was not what anyone wanted from a car that looked like this. Then there was the practical problem. The Prowler had almost no trunk. Virtually zero usable storage. Chrysler actually acknowledged this so directly that they offered, as a factory option, a matching trailer. A $5,000 coordinated trailer, styled to look like the rear end of the Prowler itself, complete with 15-inch versions of the car's distinctive 5-spoke wheels, available in any factory color to match your car. It was charming. It was clever. It was also, frankly, an admission that the car couldn't carry groceries without help. The trailer had a tow hitch. But Chrysler was so worried about liability that they literally affixed a warning label to that hitch, a physical sticker, saying it could only be used for the official Prowler trailer. Using it to tow anything else, a boat, a camper, a utility trailer, would void the factory warranty. The hitch existed for one purpose and one purpose only. The Prowler was, in this sense, a car that came with its own very specific accessory, and nothing else. Pricing added another layer of complexity. The 1997 Prowler launched at $38,300. Not cheap. Not supercar money, but not economy car money either. As the years progressed, the price climbed: $39,300 in 1999, $43,000 in 2000, $44,225 in 2001, $44,625 in 2002. And because production was so limited, only 457 cars in 1997, dealers immediately began marking them up. Some Prowlers were selling for $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 over sticker price at the height of the initial frenzy. That was great for dealers, terrible for buyers. And it created an expectation that the Prowler was somehow a collectible investment vehicle, something to be acquired and preserved, not driven. People were buying Prowlers and putting them in climate-controlled garages with 5 miles on the odometer, waiting for values to appreciate. But the Prowler wasn't built to sit in garages. And the market couldn't decide. Was this a sports car? A show car? A daily driver? A collector piece? A hot rod? A luxury cruiser? It was all of those things and none of them completely, and American buyers in 1997 had not yet developed the vocabulary to understand a car that existed outside categories. ACT4. The brand problem. 11 to 1430. There's another layer to this story that doesn't get talked about enough. And it might actually be the most important layer. The Prowler was a Plymouth. Think about what Plymouth meant in 1997. Plymouth was Chrysler's entry-level brand. The brand of the neon. The brand of reliable but unremarkable family transportation. The brand your grandfather bought because it was cheaper than a Dodge and more American than a Toyota. Plymouth was not a performance brand. Plymouth was not aspirational. Plymouth did not have the heritage of Chevrolet's Corvette division or Ford's Mustang lineage. Plymouth had the Horizon and the Sundance and the Breeze. And now, suddenly, Plymouth had the Prowler. The brand mismatch was jarring. People who wanted to spend $40,000 on a handcrafted aluminum show car were not people who identified with Plymouth. And people who identified with Plymouth were not people shopping in the $40,000 hot rod segment. The Prowler was a sports car built for a luxury market, sold under an economy brand. It was like putting a tailored Italian suit in a department store and wondering why it wasn't selling. Chrysler tried to fix this, eventually. After the Plymouth brand was discontinued in 2001, an unceremonious end to one of America's oldest automotive nameplates, the Prowler was rebadged as the Chrysler Prowler for its final 2 model years, 2001 and 2002. The Chrysler name carried more weight, more prestige, more association with premium products. But by then, the damage was done. The narrative around the Prowler was already written. And in Canada, Chrysler actually continued selling it as a Plymouth through the 2000 model year, making the Prowler the very last Plymouth ever sold in Canada. The end of a brand. The last chapter. Production numbers tell the whole story in cold numbers. In 1997, only 457 Prowlers were built. 457. For the entire year. A vanishingly small run that was partly supply, partly demand, and partly a factory still learning how to hand-assemble something this complex. Then 3,921 in 1999, 2,746 in 2000, 3,142 in 2001, 1,436 in 2002. Grand total, 11,702 cars across both Plymouth and Chrysler branding combined. 11,702. in a country that buys 15 million cars a year. But numbers can't capture what the Prowler actually meant to the people who loved it. And those people were real, passionate, devoted in a way that went beyond logic. Chrysler gave the Prowler a color palette that was pure theater. It launched in a single hue, Prowler Purple Metallic, a shade so specific, so iconic, that it became the car's identity. Then came the Prowler Yellow, the Inca Gold, the Deep Candy Red, the Midnight Blue of the Mulholland Edition, the Orange Pearl Coat that made it look like a glowing ember at sunset. Then came the special editions. The Woodward Edition, a two-tone black and red tribute to Woodward Avenue, the legendary Detroit Boulevard where American car culture was essentially invented on summer nights with teenagers drag racing stop to stop. The Black Tie Edition, two-tone black and silver, sophisticated, almost formal, a hot rod in a tuxedo. The Mulholland Edition in Midnight Blue, named for the famous winding road above Los Angeles, where celebrities and car lovers have always gone to push their machines through the canyon curves. And then, perhaps the most remarkable Prowler ever made, a single car, unique in the world, finished in high-voltage blue pearl, named the Conner Avenue Edition after the very plant where the Prowler was born. This one car, the only one of its kind, was auctioned at Christie's. Christie's, the same auction house that sells Picassos and ancient Roman artifacts and jewels worn by royalty. A production car. A Plymouth. Sold at Christie's. That's the power of what the Prowler meant to people who understood it. In 1998, someone decided to seal a Plymouth Prowler inside a time capsule in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in a mausoleum in Centennial Park, placed in an above-ground vault, protected inside a plastic enclosure. The plan? Open it in 2048. Return it to Chrysler. Let the future see what 1997 looked like when it dared to dream. Experts believe this Prowler, unlike the famous buried 1957 Plymouth Belvedere, which was destroyed by a failed underground vault, has a genuine chance of surviving intact. A car preserved for 50 years as a message to the future. That is not the story of a failure. That is the story of something that mattered. In 1999, at the SEMA show in Las Vegas, the annual gathering of the custom car world, the Super Bowl of American automotive creativity, Chrysler unveiled something that made everyone lean forward. The Plymouth Howler. It was a concept, a Prowler-based truck. Or rather, the wild cross between a hot rod and a pickup that nobody knew they needed until they saw it. The same open-wheel stance, the same theatrical proportions, but with a small truck bed out back, a little cargo area with a tailgate and a hard tonneau cover. Compact. Absurd. Wonderful. And under the hood of the Howler? Not a V6. Jeep's brand new 4.7-liter PowerTech V8, paired to a Borg-Warner 5-speed manual gearbox. The V8 that the Prowler critics always demanded. The stick shift that purists always wanted. The Howler concept was Chrysler saying, "We hear you. We know what you wanted. Here it is." And then they did nothing with it. The Howler remained a concept. It never became a production vehicle. The moment passed. The window closed. One can only imagine the alternate history. A Prowler with a V8. A Prowler with a manual gearbox. A Prowler that answered every single criticism the press had leveled at the original. Would it have saved the model? Would it have given the Prowler the legacy it deserved? We'll never know. February 15th, 2002. The last Plymouth Prowler, or rather, the last Chrysler Prowler, rolls off the line at the Conner Avenue assembly plant in Detroit. The workers who built it, the people who hand-assembled those aluminum panels and fitted those dramatic wheels and tightened those hand-stitched leather seats, knew it was the last one. They signed it. Some of them cried. The Conner Avenue plant went quiet after that. The Prowler's niche, that strange, wonderful, undefined niche of the retro American sports car, would eventually be filled, sort of, by the Chrysler Crossfire in 2004. A German-influenced two-seater built on Mercedes SLK architecture. Competent. Reasonably fast. But cold. Calculated. Missing that essential American lunacy that made the Prowler unforgettable. The Crossfire didn't inspire time capsules. Nobody auctioned a Crossfire at Christie's. So what happened to the Prowler? The easy answer. The answer that bad automotive journalism reaches for is that it failed because of the V6, or the price, or the brand mismatch. And those things all contributed. They absolutely did. But the real answer is more complicated and more human. The Prowler failed because America in the late 1990s wasn't ready for a car that defied categories. It wasn't a muscle car. It wasn't a sports car. It wasn't a luxury car. It was a feeling on wheels. It was a rolling artistic statement. It was the automotive equivalent of a poem, something you experience, not something you benchmark. And American car culture, at that particular moment in history, was built around benchmarks. 0 to 60, quarter mile, horsepower per dollar, track times, column inches of comparison charts. The Prowler couldn't win those arguments. It wasn't designed to win those arguments. It was designed to make you forget arguments even existed. The people who bought them and drove them, really drove them, put miles on them, took them to car shows and cruise nights and winding mountain roads. Those people understood. They didn't care about the V6. They cared about the way people looked at them at stoplights. They cared about the sound of that intake at wide-open throttle. They cared about sitting low to the ground with the wind in their face and those massive rear wheels visible in the mirror, planted and confident on the pavement behind them. Today, the Prowler occupies a fascinating middle space in the collector car world. With only 11,702 ever built, examples are genuinely scarce. Values have stabilized and, in some cases, grown, particularly for low-mileage, single-owner cars in rare colors or special editions. The Woodward Edition, the Mulholland Edition, the original 1997 cars in Prowler purple. The internet age, perhaps inevitably, has been kind to the Prowler. YouTube videos celebrating its design reach hundreds of thousands of views. Instagram accounts devoted entirely to Prowler spotting have thousands of followers. A whole generation of younger enthusiasts, kids who weren't alive when the Prowler was new, has discovered it, fallen for it, and decided it is, in fact, one of the coolest cars ever made in America. They're not wrong. Somewhere in Tulsa, Oklahoma, sealed in an above-ground vault in Centennial Park, a 1997 Plymouth Prowler sits in darkness. Purple. Perfect. Waiting. The people who put it there believed enough in what this car represented, in what it meant about American ingenuity and boldness and the pure, irrational, glorious stupidity of building a handcrafted aluminum hot rod in an era of spreadsheets and focus groups, that they sealed it away for 50 years. They wanted the future to see it. And when that vault opens in 2048, when someone pries back that enclosure and finds the Prowler inside, still purple, still wide, still wearing those naked front wheels and those dramatic rear haunches, whoever is standing there is going to understand something immediately. They're going to understand that once, in Detroit, in the middle of the 1990s, someone stood in a design studio and said, "Forget everything practical. Forget the benchmarks. Forget the brand guidelines. Forget what makes sense. Build the thing that makes people feel something." And for 6 model years, one handcrafted aluminum car at a time, they did. That's not failure. That's a love letter written in purple metallic paint, 214 horsepower, and 11,702 acts of defiance. The Plymouth Prowler didn't fail. It just arrived somewhere America wasn't quite ready to go.